when Dean Martin died on Christmas morning, 1995. His family expected to find the usual celebrity estate documents. But what they discovered in a secret room behind his Graceland-style mansion would shock the world and reveal that America's coolest entertainer had been living the most extraordinary double life in Hollywood history, secretly operating a massive charitable empire that had touched millions of lives, while he carefully maintained his image as a carefree playboy who cared about nothing more than golf, drinks, and good times. It was December 26, 1995, one day after Dean Martin's peaceful death at age 78, when his son, Richie Martin, was going through his father's Beverly Hills mansion to begin settling the estate. Richie had expected to find the typical possessions of a wealthy entertainer: awards, photographs, expensive artwork, and the memorabilia that accumulates over a 60-year career in show business. What Richie didn't expect to find was a hidden door behind Dean's home office bookshelf, concealed so cleverly that it had remained undetected by family members, housekeepers, and countless visitors who had been in Dean's home over the decades. The hidden door had been discovered accidentally when Richie was removing books from Dean's collection and noticed that one section of the bookshelf felt different when he leaned against it. When Richie applied pressure to investigate, the entire section swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a room that no one in Dean's family had ever known existed. Inside the secret room, Richie found something that would revolutionize everything the world thought it knew about his father's character and values. The room was filled with filing cabinets, financial records, correspondence, photographs, and documentation that revealed Dean Martin had been operating one of the largest and most comprehensive private charitable operations in American history. The scope of Dean's secret philanthropy was staggering. Over the course of 35 years, from 1960 until his death, Dean had quietly donated over $50 million to causes ranging from children's hospitals and military veteran support to disaster relief and education funding. But more shocking than the financial magnitude was the personal involvement and careful attention Dean had given to each charitable project. The secret room contained thousands of letters from people whose lives Dean had changed, thank you notes from organizations he had supported, and detailed records of his personal involvement in charitable activities that he had never allowed to become public. Dean had apparently spent enormous amounts of time and energy on his philanthropy, while maintaining his public image as someone whose only interests were entertainment, golf, and relaxation. Among the most remarkable discoveries were records showing that Dean had been secretly paying the college tuition for hundreds of students whose families couldn't afford higher education. Beginning in 1962, Dean had established a private scholarship fund that provided full tuition, room, board, and living expenses for academically gifted students from working-class backgrounds. The scholarship program had been administered through a network of high school guidance counselors and college financial aid officers who had been sworn to secrecy about the source of the funding. Students who received Dean's scholarships believed they were being supported by anonymous private donors or foundation grants, never knowing that their education was being funded by the man who sang "That's Amore" and starred in movies with Jerry Lewis. Richie found records showing that over 800 students had received complete college educations through Dean's secret scholarship program, with many going on to become doctors, lawyers, teachers, engineers, and other professionals who contributed significantly to their communities. The total cost of Dean's educational philanthropy exceeded $15 million, making it one of the largest private scholarship programs ever operated by an individual. But Dean's educational support had extended far beyond college tuition. The secret room revealed that Dean had also been funding elementary and high school programs in underserved communities, providing supplies, equipment, and teacher training for schools that lacked basic educational resources. Dean had apparently visited many of these schools personally, posing as a consultant or donor representative, to observe the impact of his contributions and ensure that funding was being used effectively. Teachers and administrators who had met with this mysterious benefactor had no idea they were speaking with one of the most famous entertainers in the world. Among the most heartbreaking discoveries in Dean's secret room were records of his involvement with children's hospitals and medical treatment programs. For over 20 years, Dean had been secretly paying for experimental treatments, surgeries, and specialized medical care for children whose families couldn't afford life-saving procedures. The medical philanthropy records showed that Dean had personally researched cutting-edge treatments and connected families with leading specialists around the world. Dean had apparently spent countless hours studying medical journals, consulting with doctors, and developing networks of medical professionals who could provide the best possible care for children in desperate situations. One file contained correspondence with a pediatric cardiac surgeon at Boston Children's Hospital, showing that Dean had funded a complete cardiac surgery program that had saved the lives of over 300 children with congenital heart defects. The surgeon's letters to Dean were filled with gratitude and detailed reports about each child's progress, revealing that Dean had requested regular updates on every patient whose treatment he had funded. Another medical file documented Dean's support for childhood cancer research, including funding for experimental treatments that were too expensive for families to afford through insurance or government programs. Dean had apparently maintained relationships with oncologists at major cancer centers, ensuring that promising treatments reached children who needed them, regardless of their family's financial circumstances. The scope of Dean's medical philanthropy was extraordinary, totaling over $25 million and touching the lives of thousands of children and families who had faced devastating medical crises. What made Dean's medical charity even more remarkable was the personal attention he had given to each case, often corresponding directly with families and following children's progress for years after their treatments. But perhaps the most surprising discovery in Dean's secret room was evidence of his extensive support for military veterans and their families. For 3 decades, Dean had been operating a comprehensive veterans assistance program that provided housing, medical care, job training, and financial support for former servicemen who were struggling with civilian life. The veterans program had been inspired by Dean's World War II service and his understanding of the challenges that soldiers faced when returning from combat. Dean had apparently identified gaps in government veteran support programs and had created private initiatives to address needs that weren't being met by official channels. Records showed that Dean had purchased and renovated dozens of apartment buildings, specifically to provide low-cost housing for veterans and their families. These properties had been managed by a private real estate company that handled maintenance and tenant services while keeping Dean's ownership completely confidential. Dean had also funded job training programs for veterans who needed skills development to succeed in civilian careers. The training programs had been operated through partnerships with trade schools and community colleges, with Dean covering all costs for veterans who couldn't afford tuition or living expenses during their education. Most remarkably, Dean had personally visited many of the veterans he supported, often spending hours listening to their stories and providing emotional support in addition to financial assistance. Veterans who had been helped by Dean's programs had no idea that their benefactor was the famous entertainer who performed in Las Vegas and appeared on television variety shows. The veterans' program files contained hundreds of letters from former servicemen and their families, expressing gratitude for assistance that had literally saved their lives and restored their hope for the future. Many of these letters mentioned conversations with a kind man who had visited them during difficult times, providing encouragement and practical advice that had been as valuable as the financial support. Dean's secret philanthropy had also extended to disaster relief and emergency assistance for communities facing natural disasters, economic hardship, or other crises. The room contained records of Dean's rapid response to hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, and other disasters that had devastated American communities over the decades. When Hurricane Camille struck the Gulf Coast in 1969, Dean had immediately mobilized private resources to provide emergency housing, food, medical supplies, and reconstruction assistance to affected communities. Dean's disaster relief had been coordinated through a network of private contractors and volunteer organizations that could respond more quickly than government agencies. Similarly, when economic recession hit industrial communities in the Midwest during the 1970s, Dean had funded job retraining programs, small business loans, and family assistance programs that helped thousands of people maintain their dignity and rebuild their lives during difficult economic times. The disaster relief files showed that Dean had developed sophisticated systems for identifying communities in need and delivering assistance effectively and discreetly. Dean had apparently studied disaster response methodology and had created private relief capabilities that could supplement official government efforts while maintaining complete anonymity about the source of support. Among the most touching discoveries in Dean's secret room were personal files documenting his relationships with individual families and children he had supported over many years. These files contained photographs, letters, school reports, and personal updates that showed Dean had maintained long-term connections with many of the people he had helped. One file documented Dean's 20-year relationship with the Gonzalez family, whose daughter Maria had been born with severe physical disabilities that required constant medical care and specialized education. Dean had funded Maria's medical treatments, her education at special schools, and her family's living expenses while they cared for her. The file contained dozens of letters between Dean and Maria's parents, along with photographs of Maria's progress and achievements over the years. Dean had apparently attended Maria's high school graduation in disguise and had continued supporting her through college and into her career as a social worker who helped other disabled children. Another personal file documented Dean's support for Tommy Chen, an orphan child whose parents had died in a car accident, leaving him with no family and no resources for his education or care. Dean had arranged for Tommy's placement with a loving foster family and had funded his complete education from elementary school through medical school. Tommy had become a pediatric surgeon who specialized in helping children from disadvantaged backgrounds, never knowing that his education and opportunities had been provided by the entertainer whose music he had grown up listening to. The file contained a letter from Tommy as an adult, written to his unknown benefactor, expressing gratitude for the chances he had been given and his commitment to helping other children in similar situations. The discovery of Dean Martin's secret philanthropy sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the entertainment industry, completely rewriting the narrative about one of America's most beloved performers. The man who had carefully cultivated an image as a carefree playboy had actually been one of the most dedicated and effective philanthropists in American history. Entertainment industry figures who had known Dean for decades expressed amazement at the scope and depth of his charitable work. Frank Sinatra, who had been Dean's closest friend and fellow Rat Pack member, admitted that he had never suspected the extent of Dean's secret philanthropy, despite their intimate friendship that had lasted over 40 years. "Dean fooled all of us," Sinatra said in a statement released after the discovery. "We thought we knew him as well as anyone could know another person, but he had this whole other life dedicated to helping people, and he never said a word about it. That's the most Dean Martin thing imaginable. He was too cool to brag about being the most generous man in Hollywood." Sammy Davis Jr., despite his own failing health, traveled to Los Angeles to join the family in reviewing Dean's charitable records. Davis was particularly moved by discovering that Dean had secretly funded treatments for dozens of children with vision problems, including several who had received sight-saving surgeries that their families could never have afforded. "Dean knew about my eye injury and how much vision meant to me," Davis said through tears. "But I never knew he was out there saving other people's sight." He was looking out for kids who needed what I had lost, and he never said a word about it. That's love in action. Margaret Foster, who had served as Dean's primary charitable coordinator for 23 years, finally felt free to speak about her work with Dean after his death. Foster revealed that Dean had insisted on personally reviewing every charitable request and had often spent hours researching recipients to ensure that assistance would be most effective. Mr. Martin read every letter, studied every medical report, and reviewed every scholarship application personally, Foster explained. He never made charitable decisions based on tax benefits or public relations value. He wanted to know that his help would make a real difference in real people's lives. Jerry Lewis, despite his complicated history with Dean, publicly acknowledged that learning about Dean's secret philanthropy had changed his understanding of his former partner's character. Lewis revealed that he had always wondered how Dean could afford his luxurious lifestyle while also seeming unconcerned about money, never realizing that Dean was actually living on a fraction of his income while donating the majority to charity. Dean was the ultimate professional in every aspect of his life, including his generosity, Lewis said in a rare interview about their relationship. He taught me that the best charity happens when nobody knows you're doing it, and that real kindness doesn't need applause. The financial records found in Dean's secret room also revealed the careful planning and investment strategies Dean had used to maximize the impact of his charitable giving. Dean had apparently worked with financial advisors to create investment portfolios specifically designed to generate steady income for his philanthropic activities. Among the most remarkable aspects of Dean's charity work was the geographical scope of his giving. The secret room contained maps showing charitable projects in all 50 states, with particularly intensive support for rural and underserved communities that rarely attracted attention from major philanthropists. The revelation of Dean's secret philanthropy also highlighted his innovative approaches to charitable giving that had been decades ahead of their time. Rather than simply writing checks to established charities, Dean had created direct intervention programs that addressed root causes of problems rather than just symptoms. For example, instead of just donating to food banks, Dean had funded job training programs that helped unemployed people develop skills for steady employment that would eliminate their need for food assistance. Instead of just supporting homeless shelters, Dean had created transitional housing programs that helped people rebuild their lives and achieve permanent housing stability. The comprehensive nature of Dean's charitable work had created ripple effects that multiplied the impact of his giving far beyond the direct recipients of his assistance. Scholarship recipients who became teachers, doctors, and other professionals contributed their skills to their communities for decades after receiving Dean's support. Veterans who received job training through Dean's programs often became mentors and advocates for other veterans, creating networks of mutual support that extended Dean's impact throughout the veteran community. The housing programs Dean funded in underserved communities often became catalysts for broader community development that improved conditions for entire neighborhoods. Perhaps most significantly, Dean's model of anonymous, personal philanthropy inspired changes in how charitable giving was practiced throughout American society. The revelation that one of America's most famous celebrities had been quietly giving away 60% of his income while maintaining complete anonymity about his charitable work challenged conventional assumptions about celebrity charity and social responsibility. Universities began studying Dean's philanthropic methods as a model for effective charitable giving, with business schools incorporating his approach into their curricula on nonprofit management and social entrepreneurship. The Dean Martin model became synonymous with thoughtful, strategic philanthropy that prioritized long-term impact over immediate publicity. Major foundations and wealthy individuals began adopting Dean's principles of anonymous giving, personal involvement in charitable projects, and focus on addressing root causes rather than symptoms. The transformation in American philanthropy that followed Dean's revelations was later credited with improving the effectiveness of charitable giving across multiple sectors. The revelation of Dean's philanthropy also explained many aspects of his lifestyle and behavior that had puzzled friends and observers over the years. Dean's frequent absences from social events, his habit of leaving parties early, and his mysterious trips that he had explained as business meetings had actually been related to his charitable activities. Dean's famous reluctance to discuss his personal life or to grant in-depth interviews had apparently been motivated partly by his determination to keep his philanthropic work secret. Dean had understood that publicity about his charity would have fundamentally changed how people perceived him and would have turned his philanthropy into a public relations tool rather than genuine assistance for people in need. The scope of Dean's secret charity work also explained his legendary work ethic and his willingness to maintain a demanding performance schedule well into his 70s. Dean's entertainment career had been the engine that powered his philanthropic activities, and he had continued performing not just for his own enjoyment, but to generate the income necessary to fund his extensive charitable commitments. Financial records found in the secret room showed that Dean had donated approximately 60% of his lifetime earnings to charitable causes, keeping only enough income to maintain his lifestyle and support his family. Dean's apparent extravagance and luxury had been real, but they had represented only a fraction of his total wealth, with the majority of his resources being directed toward helping others. The discovery of Dean Martin's secret philanthropy inspired changes in how the entertainment industry and the general public thought about celebrity charity and social responsibility. Dean's model of private, anonymous giving became a standard that other wealthy individuals began to emulate, understanding that effective philanthropy required personal involvement and long-term commitment rather than just public gestures and tax deductions. Educational institutions, hospitals, and charitable organizations that had benefited from Dean's secret support began establishing programs and funds in his memory, ensuring that his philanthropic legacy would continue helping people for generations to come. The Dean Martin Foundation, established by his family after the discovery of his secret philanthropy, continues to operate scholarship programs, medical assistance funds, and veteran support initiatives that follow the principles Dean had demonstrated throughout his charitable career: personal involvement, long-term commitment, and respect for the dignity of people receiving assistance. The story of Dean Martin's secret philanthropy became one of the most inspiring celebrity stories ever revealed, proving that true character is measured not by public recognition, but by private actions, and that the greatest generosity often happens when no one is watching and no credit is expected. Dean's legacy transformed how America understood celebrity responsibility, demonstrating that authentic compassion requires no audience and that the most meaningful contributions to society occur in silence, away from cameras and applause, motivated only by love for humanity and commitment to making the world better for those who need help most. If this story of hidden generosity and the power of secret charity moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with anyone who needs to know that real heroes often do their greatest work in complete silence, and that true character is revealed not by what we do for recognition, but by what we do when nobody will ever know. Have you ever experienced anonymous kindness that changed your life? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about the hidden compassion that makes the world better when nobody is watching. True greatness requires no applause, only pure intention, genuine love, silent action, and humble heart.